On a journey, mile markers show your progress toward a destination.
New places to see, new people to meet.
And yet, adulting? It's exciting.
And it's hard.
New experiences.
New fears to conquer.
New questions that need answers.
None of us get to the destination on our own. When that destination feels 1,000 miles away, you're not on that road alone.
Well, Mike Novotny, I can start.
Hey, let's start.
We'll start. Hey everybody, I'm Mike Westendorf. This is Pastor Mike Novotny, and you are part of our inaugural, so brand new, we don't even have a name for it, conversation with a generation basically of young adults that all the older people, like our generation, calls you Gen Z. I'm not sure who comes up with all of these, but we want to be able to talk with all of you who are in that 18 to 25, that young adult space of life. We both share a passion for walking with you. Pastor Mike, in his work as a pastor, I've been part of university world for about 13 years in campus ministry. And we've had a chance to do a lot of life and to be able to walk with many of you. And we've heard from you. We're trying to glean wisdom from you. And what we're finding is that there's some things that older generations can offer too. And so what we're going to be doing over these next several months is introducing you to some of the key people who are going to be part of this content that's here to encourage you, maybe inspire you, maybe educate you, maybe give you a reason to ask the hard questions that you haven't wanted to ask of somebody like myself or Pastor Mike or other people in your generation. So what we want to do today is we want to introduce you to Pastor Mike Novotny. We had a chance to have a bit of it's kind of a focal group as we're just daydreaming and just what would we do? What would this look like for us to be able to reach out? And it was interesting because we had a number of them say, we asked the question, if you had troubles in your life, if you had big questions in your life, how many of you would turn to a pastor or a religious figure first? And it was an overwhelmingly 0. But
should I leave? Would this be better?
No. Because as we kind of dug into that a little bit, it was overwhelming that they want people who have not just the title pastor behind their name, but somebody who understands the original manuscripts, the original language of it. It's not just some guy who is reading off of a book that somebody else wrote. They want to hear from the pastor, but you're not necessarily the first person they want to go to. And so what we thought we would do is we said we're looking for people who have an authentic love and genuine care for all kinds of people, and particularly this generation. And your name just kept coming up over and over and over again. So we would like you guys to be able to get to know Pastor Mike. So I'm here to ask I'm going to lob you a couple softballs, and I'm going to throw a couple maybe curveballs. And so they said authentic. So we didn't even send you these questions.
I know, I'm a planner, so I'm slightly anxious and panicking about this.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about anxiety later on, so it'll be great. But to just kind of establish what we wanted to do is Pastor Mike is part of the Time of Grace Ministries and is a lead pastor for that. So you can see a lot of his work on a weekly basis, and you do a phenomenal job with explaining God's way in a way that we can understand, take in, and apply, which I love. But you also have kind of leveraged in 5 principles that you live by that are really core to what makes you tick and what drives your desire in your heart. And I was wondering if you might be able to talk about those 5.
I'd love to.
Okay.
Where do you want to start? You got 5 down?
I'm curious because I think this generation has told us over and over again about the need for authenticity. So why don't you start with transparency? How is that one?
That's huge. Yeah, transparency is almost at the top of my list because I found out as a Christian in the church world, as a pastor, that if you're not vulnerable and saying something first, people won't say it back to you. So I find out that when I preach and I'm pretty honest about the junk that I've been through, that people will show up and they will be willing to talk to a pastor. Yeah. But if I position myself as someone who's just going to give you like the right way or the truth, but I got this right and I'll follow my example, no one texts me. I have less work to do during the week because no one comes back. So I found, I think this is a human thing, but especially with young adults, like if you're not approachable because they know you're human, they're not going to approach you. And you can't offer real help and real Jesus and real grace. So for me, and I mean, still after all these years of doing it, I sometimes, you ever drive home and wonder, like after a party, did I say too much? Could I put that conversation back in my mouth?
Right.
Because I'll get up there on stage and, there's a microphone and there's cameras. And I really believe that being transparent is the best way to bless people.
Right. That
church doesn't become just morality improvements.
Right.
And we're the good people that's figured it out. But hey, the guy who's standing in front is a spiritual mess more often than not. And that's why we love Jesus.
Right.
So for me, being honest about my past and even my present, some people are transparent about I used to struggle with, but then I met Jesus.
Right.
And so if you're a Christian or if you're not, you just assume like, oh, but then you met Jesus and now your life is so tidy.
Right.
So that's the scary part. It takes a little bit of courage to talk about my former struggles. I think it takes even a lot more courage and trust in God to say, but right now, but this week, but last night, and really hold on to the cross in moments like that.
And if I can jump in, as I've talked with more people, we kept hearing, even in that group and in other people, struggle. You struggle. We struggle. And to be able to talk about that is so critical. Otherwise, you just become another book.
Yeah.
I could read that, I could put it down, and I could. Yeah. But to actually give people the freedom to struggle.
Yeah.
Because that's what we've been given. Yeah. So
that's huge. And that's what I love about the Bible. The Apostle Paul is so transparent about the stuff he kept struggling with, and you love him for it.
Yeah.
You want to read what he said. You don't say, well, this is a stupid book. This guy hasn't figured it out yet. Why would I listen to him? Right. Like, you can relate to him, right. And his struggle and his love of Jesus becomes all the more beautiful. So I think, especially maybe generations past, my grandparents, they wanted the great example to follow.
Yeah.
I think,
I'm not going to let you in.
I think things have changed so much that older generations might be a little bit put off by that approach, but it becomes much, much easier for younger people and younger Christians to lean in and listen.
And there's a lesson in that too, because we've kind of grown up, and if you kind of know some of those older people, this is one of the ideas of being transparent and having people that you can have a safe place to be able to go. And that's one of the things that I think that we're hoping that one day we'll earn people's trust to be a safe place where you can share, where we can help you develop and just see what a safe place looks like. But how many older generations are trapped in that box because they can't now let people in?
Yeah. And I think it's stunted them. What a lot of younger people are telling me is that, grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, they prayed the prayers and they went to the Bible studies, but did they talk transparently in their home about sin and forgiveness? And so many young people have seen that, like, this is what Christianity is, this outward spiritual habits, checking the boxes.
Right.
But they could grow up for 20 years without having an honest conversation with dad about why he loves Jesus for the sake of mercy and patience and grace.
Right.
So there's some great things that previous generations have done. And
Absolutely.
I don't want to minimize that, but I think
absolutely.
If there was going to be one weakness that we're now unfortunately reaping the not bad benefits of, but whatever the word I'm looking for. The challenges of that is that it's so much more about the show and the facade than about authentic.
Right. God
help me, because I need help.
Right, and it's fascinating too that a lot of times with a younger generation, and you guys are going to see this too, as you get older and you're sitting in this space or you're the parent, that your kids and the generations that come up, they're going to respond to something that they've seen that was overdone in your generation. Just like you guys are saying, please, we're begging for authenticity. We're the generation that gave you Facebook and social media, and they know, and let's face it, there's people in boardrooms our age and older who know how to use that to make money and stuff like that. That's and one day, it's like, oh, this is how this goes. But then you're going to be in the same position that we are, and another generation's going to be pushing back. So we are thankful for your cry and desire for authenticity and transparency, which I want to go to another one of the principles that you talked about, because I think that it goes hand in hand with that clarity.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of social media and fake news and everything else that...
Yeah, for me, clarity is, for most people, even people who've gone to church a lot, when I'm not sure if this is your experience, when you open the Bible and you can read it, and pastors like me will say, well, you should read your Bible. It'll help you with Jesus. And you try to, but it's not clear.
Right.
Think of it. This was written 2,000 to 3,500 years ago by Middle Eastern Jewish people. Like what in Hebrew and Greek.
Well, we've got a lot in common, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's so much there. So I find that when we talk about the Bible, like the number one job of who's ever leading that discussion, whether it's the young Christian who has a lot of experience, or the pastor, or the good friend, of just making it clear. Because I found when people grasp it, oftentimes this happens in like our, hey, welcome to church, first ever class, that people will say, I've been going to church for 25 years and it was never clear to me. Yeah. And once they can see it clearly, they love it. And they start eating it up. Like, this is so good and so helpful. And this gives me peace and forgiveness and joy. I just never saw it before.
Right.
So sometimes that takes extra time instead of assuming y'all know what the word forgiveness even means.
Right.
Like forgive and forget. Well, no, that's actually not what that means. Or what grace is, or what Christians are. Just slowing down to define that kind of stuff. So it's crystal clear. If people can leave church, I always think, and just know exactly what that passage says.
Right.
Like, God's going to do his thing.
Right.
But if they leave, like, that happened.
Yeah, he talked about some stuff, and
That's where you come in. You're the musician who
We're going to sing the refrain. This is what he was actually trying to say, everybody. So just sing this one refrain with us.
Pick up the pieces for us.
Right. So you have transparency, you have clarity, meditation. Now that's a principle for you.
Yeah.
And of course, we're in a time where mindfulness.
Yes.
It's interesting because if you come from a Christian background, you're like, mindfulness. Ooh, that's like some other kind of third world thing or Eastern religion. Yeah. And yet, as I'm hearing culture redefine that, it's interesting how it keeps kind of coming back to what the Bible was talking about, meditation. And so it's cool that this is one of your principles. I mean, maybe expand on that for you as a pastor.
So there's this ancient book of songs called the Psalms in the Bible, and the very first one, which kind of sets the tone, it talks about the person who's blessed. And the very first verse of the Psalm says, "Blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord." And here's the phrase, "and who meditates on it day and night." That person's like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in season. Whatever that person does prospers. And the word meditate in Hebrew is the word hagah, and it literally means...
You say that? Hagah.
Hagah. You might need a throat lozenge after you're done. Okay. It literally means to make a low groaning sound. So if you have a dog, you've ever seen a dog like chew on a bone before?
Yeah.
It's like it's enjoying it so much, it's just taking its time with it.
I will never see my dog the same way.
It's hagaing.
Wow.
And so here the Bible itself says, who's the blessed, like spiritually happy person is the one who hagahs on the things that God said. So if you just read it, or you just go to church and you listen, or you pick a passage or watch a YouTube video, or hey, that's nice on Instagram, someone put a Bible passage, like, but you don't chew on it, you don't meditate. It's kind of like a throat lozenge that you just. You have to let it like dissolve.
You'll have the eucalyptus in your stomach, and not right here where you need it.
Yeah. And so for me, even with all my experience, I mean, I got my bachelor's, and then I got my master's, and then I got my doctorate in the Bible.
Right.
And even after all that experience, I find that if I just open up the Bible and read a paragraph and close it, like it does almost nothing for me. I'm not blessed because I didn't hagah, I didn't chew on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge challenge for the next generation. Things move so fast. My phone is buzzing so often that I can read something, or I can listen, then I pull my phone out as soon as the message is done. But will you have the spiritual strength? Will you work that muscle to say no to the temptations and distractions and just meditate on the things that God himself is saying to you? Because if you do, you'll spiritually prosper. You will be blessed, but it's not automatic, and it's not the way our culture teaches us to live.
Right. And I'm kind of, thinking that this is going to be one of the conversations that you'll have with one of our the other young adults who are going to be part of this ministry as well, is having a conversation, because I'm listening to you go and talk about this. I'm going, okay, teach me how to do that. So we won't do that today. Okay. But that is going to be, and if you're thinking this is something you'd like us to be able to do, and by the way, if there's anything like, go further with that one. We're looking for what do you want to learn about as we continue to talk through these. So meditation, I love that piece of things. Apparently I turned my list off. Family. So family, and with the caveat that we understand too that I came from one, that I'm grateful.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, let me qualify that. Context here. I came from an imperfect family, but a mom and dad is still together. And that word family, we talk about it as both biological family and functional family. The people who you actually do life with, and then the people who you are biologically connected to, and then the smallest form of it when just my wife and my kids.
Sure.
Now, I was very blessed to be able to have a family that is still together.
Yeah.
Not perfect, by the way. Not perfect, by the way. If you want stories, just email me and I'll. But you have family as a thing, and I would love to hear your heart for family, but maybe that heart for family too that carries over into the places that some of the people who are going to be watching and who are listening to this right now wish that they could have what you have.
That's good. I want to give that some more thought too, because when I chose that as a principle, it came for me personally as a guy who's married, a guy who has 2 daughters, a guy who doesn't want to forget about those relationships. As I'm pursuing work and friendships. So for me, at the very base of that, the assumption, when I came to the church I'm at now in Appleton, I remember saying, I'm going to try to love you and be a good pastor at this church, but I will never do it at the expense of having a marriage I have to be ashamed of. Or daughters who grew up not liking the church because it was like daddy's mistress.
Right.
And he would spend time with the church people all the time, but he's never home for dinner.
Right.
So for me, it was just a clear, God, I'm going to date my wife, I'm going to date my 2 daughters, and then comes my job.
And I want you to go back there, but I just want you guys to know that idea of the church as a mistress for pastors and for religious leaders. I'm a musician and I work in the church and I love the church, but man, you guys just need to know that it is a major struggle for us to keep even our priorities straight. And so that's one of the things I have appreciated as I've gotten to know you, is that you have set a really good example for people, because it's not negotiable for you. But I would just want you guys to know that these are one of those places where you pray for your Christian leaders, if you're coming from a Christian background, and if you're not a Christian at this point and you're wondering man, why are you all messed up? We get our priorities out of whack just like you do. And one of the things that we'll be talking about as we close today is grace. That's the one thing that we're so grateful for. But I love that you have that commitment to family as a pastor, where you could get taken in a billion different directions.
And maybe the connection with everyone listening and watching is, I bet if you grew up and you had a dad that was there for you and that loved you, that probably means the world to you. And if you didn't, I bet that's in your top 3 things about what you wish you could change about life. So I think about that. If I'm trying to lead people spiritually, if I can represent the best of a man who loves his home and isn't pursuing some earthly success and people at home are crying for his attention.
Right.
That's always a tough balance, and it's easy to say with you, but in practice, it's saying no to 1,000 great opportunities. So I can say yes to this one. But that is, when I die, I want to just say, I dated my wife and daughters until my last breath. So I don't know if it's going to work out, but ever since I go on a date with my wife every Friday, and then one date with each of my daughters individually every month. And we always take a picture. Most of the time it involves food. And, ever since they were little, and my hope and my dream, maybe it's just a dad being sentimental, is that one day, if my daughters get married, don't have to, but if they do, that's going to be before I hand them off to some man. I'm going to say, I dated her. You're it. Here's this. I'll put together some, they want to have PowerPoint slideshows, whatever technology they develop. I just want to be like, this is what she's used to. I wanted to give her a glimpse of a God who loves spending time with her. And so I tried my best to build that into my life schedule and prioritize it. And now you, sir, it's your turn.
And for all the young ladies who are listening in right there, that is, again, we do this imperfectly. It's one of the hopes and prayers that we have. And Lord and daughters, forgive your dad's faults. But that is what you're looking for when you talk about a man that you're wanting to be with and to spend life with. Because we're going to get into dating and marriage and stuff like this as we go through all these things. But that's just a glimpse, and I hope that maybe someplace you just lock that in about, that is one of the ideals, even if we don't always live up to it perfectly. What you've just said is wonderful.
Yeah, just a glimpse. You said it well. I mean, all this stuff falls short in life practice, but if we can give the next generation a glimpse of the love, the faithfulness, the compassion of God, even if it's not as frequent as we want it to be, just for them to see, like, wow, God is incredible. Sometimes he's all you got, but when you've had those glimpses of him, you know how powerful it is, that he's all you need.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's family for me.
Awesome. And then the last one of your principles is it has to do with outreach. And out of this part of this conversation, I'm going to ask you some questions related to that. But outreach. Now, this is a very this is kind of falls into that religious thing. If you're not a Christian, you're like, oh, here comes these religious people trying to convert the world again. But there is a message that we have that is also really. It is one of a kind, literally. But before I get into that and we talk about that, what's your heart? What's that principle for outreach that you have?
Yeah, outreach for me is just, I don't want to reserve all of my love and friendship for people who already believe what I believe.
Yeah.
So it's really easy. You've probably seen this in the church world. If you work in the church and if your family comes to church with you and you've made some friends at church, you can easily insulate, and you really don't know anyone of a different religion or no religion at all, or has serious questions and doubts. Right. You can kind of become this echo chamber of
Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah.
There's no critical thinking. But I don't know. I went to public school my whole life growing up, and often I was the only one who really went to church among my circle of friends, who was really passionate about it. So I'd love people like that. Like on my soccer team, I got guys from all over the world, all different religions, Muslim, Buddhist, Catholic, nothing at all, a bunch of atheists. And I just love hanging out with those people. At church, people don't swear in front of me very often. So it's nice to know those words still exist. And it's just amazing to talk about that kind of stuff and hear people's honest questions, outside of the official pastor and we're gathered for church.
Right.
So just having, like you said, this is really good news. This isn't some brainwashing. We want to give you our magic spiritual pill. It's, I've never seen anything like this. I've never experienced peace like this. No one gives me joy like Jesus does. And if I care about you, I want you at least to hear about that. Right. I can't force you to believe it. I'll love you even if you don't. But man, I wouldn't be a very good friend to you if I didn't at least give you a chance to hear the best thing about my life.
Yeah. That's awesome. So these are the 5 principles. When we talk about as this grows, Pastor Mike Novotny, you get a chance to hear his heart in the principles. So the transparency, the clarity, the meditation, family, and outreach are some of the big core things. And I wanted to ask him a couple of questions that aren't quite the loud softballs, because I too I have a chance to be in the public sector, in the public world, and you get a chance to work with some fantastic people who don't believe the same things that I believe. And they occasionally do have questions, and it is really an interesting space to be able to listen and hear what they have to say. And then of course you read the culture, and so much of what we read on social media or in the news, we all have questions about that. What is, it's spin, and what's truth, and what was the real conversation, even the history books, as we grew up with one version of history and the lack of perspectives on the other spaces and on a topic. One of the hardest things in this world right now is that we have no middle. And without a middle, somebody in the middle, the two people can't talk to each other. And so putting yourself in the middle means you have to be willing to wrestle with some hard questions. And one of the questions that we hear is that idea that this generation, it watched recessions dump their moms and dads. In 2008, a lot of parents lost jobs.
Yeah, mine did.
Millennials didn't get the jobs that they were supposed to get coming out of college, so they worked at Starbucks for 10 years instead of starting their engineering job. And so there's some, why is this whole thing like this? One of the things that then comes out of that is we don't trust institutions. We don't know what to trust from our headlines. We don't trust institutions. And the church, of course, has had its imperfections broadcast all over. We've talked and tried to establish that we are not perfect people.
Yeah.
We do live by grace, but my question basically is, we've heard this huge heart that you have for people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome that with the skeptics that are like, how can I trust them? You're a pastor? Pfft. You're part of a church? Whatever.
Yeah.
How do you, as somebody who deeply loves people,
Yeah.
and deeply loves what Jesus has done for you and that great hope, how do you overcome that skepticism?
Man.
I told you I was going to.
Hey, you're supposed to, we're softball number 6 to swing in. So how would I get a young person to overcome the skepticism about institutional religion?
Yeah.
Pastor, church, official, thing
the,
like I
the
represent.
label. Yep.
Yeah. I think, so there's a good and a bad to what's happened. I think the good is that people were super naive before we realized that what the Bible says, that everyone sins.
Yep.
Sometimes we gave too much credit to the pastor, the priest. They must be good. We must be able to trust them. And I hear some pretty disturbing stories about what that attitude brought.
Right.
And there was a lot of unchristian things happening in the organized Christian church because of it.
Right.
So the chance that we can expose that,
Yep.
I mean, that's a healthy thing
That's
for
a great
biblical Christianity.
Yes.
If we can rip that apart.
Painful.
Yeah.
But healthy.
For sure.
Yeah.
What I would say, you talked about the middle ground before.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stories about corrupt pastors, sexually immoral, greedy, money hungry, proud. So therefore, if my thought goes to, I'm never going to go to a church. Okay, you could take that stance. What if a friend betrayed me in high school, so I'm never going to have friendships?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A girl broke my heart. I'm never going to go on a date again.
Right.
Like, I think there's an intellectual middle where we can say, some people do really bad things everywhere. Government, schools, teachers, friends, cops, accountants, everyone. So having the wisdom to realize you're going to throw away a lot of really, really good stuff. For example, a young woman emails me last night, heartbreaking. Unfortunately, she got assaulted, and she reached out to talk to me. And she's asking really honest questions about God's love and can he still accept her? It's interesting. She, feels unworthy because that's coming up. Right. But because she's connected to an organized church, and I pastor her, and I know her, and I love her, I was able to follow up immediately and talk to her about God's love. Mm-hmm. And that there is a God of healing and grace and forgiveness who's going to walk with her through that. If she, as a 20-something-year-old, would have bailed on that, I'm trying to think, who would she have emailed last night? Would they have given her just compassion and grace and God's comfort? So there are very dangerous things about being naive about organized religion, but there's some pretty dangerous things about going solo in your spiritual walk too. Right. I mean, we all wrestle with thoughts that aren't exactly true. We get anxious, nervous, worried, depressed. And there's some really good things that Christians are saying that could help us with that. Mm-hmm. They could give us peace and joy back. So I would say to a young person, don't give up on church. Come in humbly and give church a try. So come in, ask honest questions. I mean, if someone came to my church and would be like, okay, so how much money do you make? Like, how much?
You can come to his church and you can ask him that on Sunday. Appleton, the court.
Is this just a racket that you want to get money out of me? Or, get to know who the pastor, come to see how they behave, what they believe, what they teach. There's some really good things that people for generations and centuries and millennia have found in gathering together in something that's more structured and organized. So come in with a critical mind, but there's some really good blessings I wouldn't want a young person to miss as they're doing things on their own.
Right. Yeah. And there's something that we talk about, this idea of skepticism, which is honestly, it's a healthy form of doubting. And then there's cynicism, which is really a defensive mechanism. Because you've been hurt, we become a cynic, and that really is trying to ward off being disappointed and, quite frankly, even despairing. And that's one of the things where I think that Christianity can do a better job of inviting the conversation with the skeptic.
Sure.
But to turn also to say, be careful and guard your heart that you don't simply become the cynic, because at that point, really what you're doing is you're trying to protect yourself from despair, but you're actually going to be stuck in it. Yeah. And so I appreciate the balance of that.
Have you ever heard the story about the drunk guy and the donkey?
Have you? No, please do tell.
Yeah, this old guy comes out of the saloon and he's just hammered. He's had too many whiskeys, and so he tried to get on this donkey that he tied up outside. And he's so woozy, he leans to the left, like smashes his face into the ground. Oh, he gets up and he's wincing. He says, "I'm never gonna do that again." So he gets on the donkey and he leans so far away, he falls off the other side. And I think of that with a lot of things in life. Like, we trusted too much in the church in the past, and now you have a generation saying, we're not going to do that again.
Right.
But there's this middle ground you were talking about.
Right.
We don't want you to end up in the same spot of getting burned just in a different way.
Right.
We want you to be in connection with God's voice and his love and his clarity of like a path for your future.
Yeah.
So don't be a drunk on a donkey.
So, I mean, you heard it here first. Come back
That's
next
not my
week. We'll
original
have
story.
some.
Actually, yeah, so you
Okay.
can find that online.
So I'm gonna ask you two more, just as, and thank you so much for the time to get to know you a little bit. You hear this one a lot. This has been around forever. I'm sure every generation on some level has seen it, but you see this pass through more and more with social media and a younger generation. You know, you've heard this too. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. How does a pastor these days respond to that?
Ooh. I think it connects to our last conversation.
That's why I asked it.
One of the reasons, good flow. One of the reasons people end up there, I think, is because of the damage that religion can do.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, being naively religious and just being independently spiritual, for a lot of people, spiritual is just, I'm going to take care of things. I'm going to make the final decision. I get the final word. But I think of anyone in any field, like if you're in academics and you're going to be independently academic, you wouldn't have any professors that you learned from. There's no one who had authority over you. It was just you. Or you're a great athlete saying, I don't want to be coached. I don't have anyone telling me what to. At the end of the day, I want to make the final call, which for me is super tempting. Like, I like, in the end, getting what I want in any relationship. So I think there's a really subtle temptation in that. Spiritual sounds nice, but if it means that I can get my way with everything, I can behave how I want to behave, I can believe whatever I want to believe and think that it's right and it's good. I think those who excel the most, even in athletics, they have someone there that's very structured to help coach them.
Right.
In academics, it's the same way. And it's not shocking that in the Christian life, we find that too. That when you have a community of people that you like committed to, and there's someone who loves you and cares about you enough to pat you on the back when you're doing well and kick you in the pants when you're not. I bet some of our best friendships are with people who can call us on our junk. You know, and because we know it helps us grow. It sucks at the time.
Right.
So to have something like that from a spiritual side of things, of like, hey, I love you, but we got to talk.
Right.
You know, you're going down a path that, trust me, it doesn't lead to a good spot. So I think it sounds nice, and religion is a naughty word these days, perhaps for some good reason.
Right.
But I think, I put it this way, Jesus organized religion. After he left, he didn't say, have fun. He picked guys who would start churches and organize communities that cared about certain standards so people would be loved and not hurt. And when we're all kind of Wild West doing whatever we see as fit, like
the drunk guy on the donkey.
Exactly. We end up in a spot that we have our independence, but sometimes being independent leaves you pretty lonely, anxious, unsure. Am I doing the right thing?
Right.
Am I on the right path? So, yeah. I'm not going to take it as a given that someone's going to walk in and say, well, it's how great you're a pastor and organized religion, wonderful.
Right.
But like I said before, hey, give it a chance. Does it seem to embody the spirit, love, generosity, forgiveness, and truth of Jesus?
Yeah.
And if it does, like, that's a really healthy spot for you to be.
Yeah. We're talking with Pastor Mike. He is going to be part of our ministry, kind of, again, a younger generation. Your generation has said, it makes me nervous. I wouldn't choose to go talk to a pastor if I'm dealing with some hard things. But I do know that when I get there, I want to talk to somebody I can trust and who's going to be real with me about the things of God. And so that's what I appreciate here. And so Pastor Mike is going to be a part of this team as we continue to take your questions and talk about the things that you care about. I want to finish our time with this idea that we live in a world that karma, you get what you deserve in the end, that you get what you pay in, and yet Christianity stands apart from that, biblical Christianity, because we can do the same thing in the church, and you see this.
Sure.
We can play that karma game too.
Yeah.
But karma versus grace. And this is where I think if there's something that we would like you to come away with, is that as young people, there's so much law in, if again we're trying to understand, all right, if I got to get this job, I've got to do all of these things and get all of this stuff, and I have to perform, and if I don't perform enough, I don't get the job, and then if I don't get the job, I don't get all of this other kind of stuff. And so you guys are living in this, whether you're in college, out of college, starting a career, wherever you might be, and yet it can bleed over into what you're thinking about religion, and then Christianity comes along. And it talks about grace. And I guess I just want to ask you to help us understand a little bit about the difference between karma, basically every other religious standard, and what the Christian gospel really is all about.
I heard one pastor say, grace is the opposite of a resume. That a resume is where I'm trying to think of, where have I studied? What kind of leadership roles? Where have I volunteered? I'm trying to give like my highlights, and I'm trying to hand it to someone, and I hope that they're impressed and they'll accept me.
That's kind of like Facebook. I mean, you're talking about this like it's like, boy, that's social media. Here's my resume, all this good stuff.
A little bit, and I think we know what that leads to, because will the person accept you? Have I worked hard enough? What if they find out about the things that I didn't put on that list? What if they call some references who call references and find out why I got kicked out of that school or got fired from that job? And so the karma system, it sounds nice and fair. What goes around comes around. Right. But it actually leads to a place of incredible, not transparency, because I got to hide that messy stuff about my life.
Right. Incredible
Anxiety, because I'm giving my best and not knowing, hoping. Right. So is the universe or God or Jesus, have I performed enough? Is my resume, how many times do you have to go to church, or how many prayers do you have to pray, or how generous do you have to be to the poor? You never really know.
Right.
And so at the very depth of your heart, you're like anxious of where you stand with God. And at the end of every day, you have to ask yourself the same question: was today's resume good enough?
Right.
Compare that with grace, where grace is all about, because of what Jesus did, you're always good enough. Not that God doesn't want to change you, but you get to the end of every day, and there is a Father who loves you and who's smiling when he thinks about you. And he wants me to improve on some things for sure, but he's not waiting for my perfect resume to say you're in. I get to sit at his table. He's there when I want to talk. When I die, I know exactly where I'm going. And it's because it's not about karma or resumes. It's about Jesus, and it's about grace.
That's what we want to leave you guys with. And that's what we hope that this will be. And it will maybe, if you don't know much about Christianity, maybe it puts a path underneath your feet that you can walk in a direction to learn more about what Pastor Mike just talked about. The grace that really does truly free, because God actually doesn't just like you, he loves you incredibly. And to know what that means and to take ownership of that, that's what we're hoping. And if you know Jesus and you've been walking, but man, these doubts come with this new time of life and the way that you're thinking and the new experiences, we're hoping that this is going to be something that will help center you, give you permission to ask us the hard questions, and even when we don't have the answers, to be able to go in prayer together with you and back to the Bible to say, Lord, help us to be able to see. And sometimes it may just be simply, guys, I just need you to see me. Jesus. So until next time, this is Pastor Mike. I'm Mike Westendorf. We'll see you again.